This is Karen with newclevelandradio.net, and it is time to avoid the maze. And I'm really excited about my guest today because as I've read her bio numerous times, even though I don't have the same career path as her, there's something about Amber that just makes me shake my head and say, wow, I know exactly what you're talking about. Amber is an attorney. She's a speaker. She is a success architect, which I hope to get a definition of that one. And she's a podcaster. And I get this feeling as I've read your bio, Amber, that you are like so many of us that we grow up having this idea, oh, this is what I want to do. When I graduate high school, I'm going to college and I'm going to study X, and then I'm going to have this wonderful career and I'm going to be successful. And somehow, somewhere in all that time frame, we start scratching our heads saying, who thought this is what I wanted to do? And when it comes to law, I certainly understand because my oldest son, his whole childhood, he was going to be president of the United States. And he geared himself for politics, went to law school. And it was a year or two out of law school that he said, I don't ever want to consider politics. And now, after 20 years in the field of law, he's even thinking about changing his career. So let's talk about Amber. Like, how did this all happen for you?
Yeah. So, first of all, if he made it 20 years before he started thinking about not practicing law, he has done better than most because I'm 10 in and I could have been done 3 years ago and I would have been fine. Yes and no to answer your question earlier. I never really had a clear path to what I wanted to be. I had this idea of what I thought was going to get me there. And this is really where this idea of a success architect comes from. It'll all make sense here in just a minute. So all I wanted to be was successful. If you talk to me about like when you were a kid, what did you want to be when you grew up? Like, I didn't really have an answer. I just knew I didn't want to be stuck in a small town, raising a family, being a stay-at-home mom. I grew up in a very, very religious community where people talked about raising a family before they talked about a career. And I was never wired that way. I never wanted children. And so I was kind of the black sheep from the beginning. And so I was constantly looking forward to college. I remember planning my college education in like 8th grade because I didn't know what I wanted to be or what I wanted to do. But I had it put in my head, like so many millennials from that generation, that college was the way to get there. So when I started college, I actually started with a computer programming degree. And my dad, as I'm telling him I'm going to go into computer programming, he says to me, Amber, you should be a lawyer. And I'm like, that sounds like a horrible idea. And he's like, no, like, you've always been drawn to legal books. I loved reading as a kid. John Grisham was my favorite author. I mentioned that I grew up in a small town, and even now, 20 years after graduation, I can go back home to visit family and I'll run into my junior high and high school English teachers, and they will tell stories about me doing book reports on John Grisham books in like 6th grade. It was just always what I was drawn to. I told my dad, like, Dad, that sounds horrible. Like, everything I know about lawyers is that lawyers are disliked. Nobody wants to be around them. I like people. I want friends. Like, one of these things doesn't fit. So I went to school and I started getting a degree in computer programming. And at the end of my first year of college, my dad was killed in a car accident. That loss, I used to say it broke me. What I've now learned is that I was broken long before then. And I use that word broken very intentionally because I don't really believe anybody's broken, yet I haven't found a better word for it yet. So, I've had this long history of trauma in my family. I lost my cousin to suicide when I was 8. I lost my uncle to suicide when I was 16. My dad died in a car accident when I was 19. I went to 10 funerals in between 8 and 19. And I didn't realize that each time somebody was ripped away from me, even if it was natural causes, that it was programming my brain to believe that people don't stick around and relationships don't matter. When my dad passed away, I started to spiral. School didn't matter anymore. I got married, I got divorced. I found myself going down paths that were unhealthy and not like anything I'd ever wanted my life to be. I still wanted to be successful. And I remember there being a moment where I thought, you know what, maybe my dad's right. Maybe I just need to do this law school thing. Like whatever I'm doing with my life right now isn't working. I'm 5 years into a 4-year degree and I'm still no closer to graduating than I was in my first semester. Like I've got to figure something out. And as soon as I made the commitment to go to law school, everything changed. I had this goal and this focus. So I graduated from undergrad 3 years after I made that decision, got accepted to law school, graduated from law school, passed the bar on my first attempt. I graduated from law school at the top of my class. And through all of this, I had created this image for myself that I was going to be this high profile criminal defense attorney in a big city, just turned out to be Vegas, that I was going to be respected and all of my problems that I didn't want to deal with were going to disappear because I was going to have this success that I had been wanting for so long. It was 2015, I'm sorry. I'm sitting in my office. I hit my first 6-figure year. I'm working in the biggest criminal defense firm in Las Vegas, and I'm miserable. And I remember looking around going, but when does it get better? Because it was supposed to be better by now. Through a series of events, I found myself on a therapist's couch for the first time in my life, which if you have not been there before and you're listening to this, I would highly encourage it. And about 6 months in, I look at her and I said, all I have ever wanted to be is successful. And I feel like I'm such a failure. And she says, Amber, you're the first person in your family to go to college. You have a law degree. You support yourself. You're self-reliant. You're respected in your field. What does success mean to you? And I said, I don't know. Nobody's ever asked me that question. And over the last, 6, 7 years now, I have worked really hard to understand the way the mind works, understand the way that we see the world, answer the question of what success means to me, and help other people answer that question of what success means to them, which is where the title of success architect comes in. There's business coaches out there, there's life coaches out there, and that's all great. But if you can't look at somebody and tell them what you think a successful life is, then the rest of it is a waste of time.
You know, it's interesting hearing your story because so many coaches bring their story into their coaching, which I think is what makes coaching so unique and helpful to all of us. I've been through therapy and I've had some good therapists. I've had some not so good therapists, and I was a good patient and I was a bad patient at the same time. Um, because when I went to therapy, I wanted somebody to cure me, except as we know, it's not about a cure. It's about digging deep inside and trying to figure out, what it is that you want. And when you talk about success, I remember growing up, success in my community was similar to yours, that you would graduate high school. Females, when you went to college, you would get a teaching degree so that when you got married, you could be home in time to make dinner for your husband who worked 9 to
Yep.
5, and you'd have summers off with your children. And I remember my first year in college, my mother said to me, we're so excited you're going to be a teacher. And I said, well, you're not going to be excited when you find out the classes I'm taking. And she said to me, and what does that mean? And I said, I'm a communications major. And I thought my mother was going to have a heart attack. It was like, you're wasting our money. And I made her a feeble promise that I would transfer those classes into a teaching degree. I think that's the first big lie I told my parents. So, I mean, I'm really lucky I made it to 18 before I told them a big lie. And I ended up getting my associates in communications because I knew that as soon as I got that, my parents were going to cut me off, which they did. Because
Wow.
back in 1968, 1970, there weren't a lot of women in the communications field. But I looked at success as having a degree, getting married, supporting my husband, having a family. And it wasn't until maybe I was late 40s, early 50s that I said to myself, I don't feel successful. I was happily married. I had children, but something was missing. So kudos to you for finding this out much earlier in life. And I say that especially to many of the millennials out there who did exactly what you did. They went to college to get a degree because they wanted to prove either they could do it or they wanted to please their parents.
Or that's what we're supposed to do, right? Like
Right.
that's what we've been told our whole life that we're supposed to do.
But as a coach, you know that we're supposed to do is
Whatever we want.
shouldn't even be in our vocabulary. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what's so crazy is that your story and my story are so similar, even though if you were to look at them, they're so objectively different.
Right.
In the fact of, you know, I tied my success to an external result, which was a law degree. You tied your success to an external result, which was a husband and a family. And so I see the same pain points come from stay-at-home moms who are now empty nesters and their entire purpose in life has gone off to college, as I do in doctors who are starting to realize that the only thing that they find value and worth in themselves in is their career. The pain points are the same, that we have tied our definition of success to an external result or accomplishment instead of looking inward to ourselves to say, what is it that I want to be? When I wake up in the morning, what makes my day a success that I can actually control? You can't control whether you got your associate's degree or not. You can't control whether you got married or not. You can't control whether you have kids or not. And so we get to say, what about me is success? Where does my definition of success lie for myself? And then those external accomplishments become things that we do to fulfill a bigger purpose for ourselves and the people around us. And we do them for as long as they serve that purpose. And then we move on easily rather than, now I'm talking career, obviously, not
Sure.
family, rather than what we've seen so much from past generations of, like, for example, when I told my family that I was going to step away from the full-time practice of law, I still practice, I practice part-time. When I was going to step back from the full-time practice of law in order to become a business coach, they all thought I had lost my damn mind. They looked at me and thought my life must be so amazing because I'm an attorney and that's a well-respected profession. And what else could you possibly want in life? And when I said, like, there's something missing and I need to figure it out, and I really think that this is it, they were really worried about me. Friends, you know, I think this is a horrible idea, Amber. I think you're throwing away something you've worked so hard for. That phrase absolutely irks me. Why would you throw away what you've worked so hard for? Because those experiences, the knowledge, the education, the experiences that I have, they're a part of my DNA at this point. So for me to then go on and do something else, I'm not throwing away the last 10 years. I'm taking that 10 years of experience and using that to be able to connect with people in the world to help make this more fulfilled, better place for us to all coincide. But I feel like too many people approach it as, if I make a shift, then that must mean that everything that I've worked so hard for in the last 10 years is a waste. So I can't change. And that's one of the biggest misconceptions about any type of professional
Oh,
shift.
absolutely. It's interesting because I started to realize that I had to find something for myself when my youngest was graduating high school. I sort of looked ahead and I thought, okay, he's going to go get his 4-year degree. Um, and initially, he was going into music, which was his love. And I was sitting back thinking, I have my associate's degree. Boy, he's going to be 2 years ahead of me. Um, and both my husband and I decided to go back to college. My husband went on for his master's. I finished my bachelor's and got my master's license. I didn't do it for anyone other than me. I needed to show myself that I was capable of doing it. And it wasn't in spite of my parents, it was because I wanted it. And when my corporate America job was just making me ill, um, I stepped out. And I was afraid my husband, my sons, even my mother, who was in her late 80s, I really thought they were all going to look at me like, you're crazy. You're the breadwinner in the family. You are making so much money. Do you know what it's going to be like without your salary? And um, I sat down and said to my husband, if I keep doing what I'm doing, I will have a heart attack and I'll be dead. So I hope we have good insurance on me. And with that, I knew I had to leave. And luckily, they stood behind me. But like you as well, I had friends who thought I was crazy.
Mm-hmm.
Why are you doing this, Karen? You are going to be 60 years old. Do you think you can have a new career now? And my answer was yes. If I want to, I can.
Yeah.
And I think, like you, um, it's like I'm not throwing away the first 6 years of my life. I'm taking all those things that I've learned, I'm taking all those things that I don't want,
Yeah.
and I'm saying and I'm looking at them, making sure I don't want them, and then figuring out what I want. So I believe for you and I, our success is not based on the title, it's not based on the income, it's based on, when I get up in the morning, do I feel like living today?
Yeah. It's so true. And, to be clear, I don't dislike practicing law. I don't love every aspect of it, but I would encourage you to point out a profession where somebody says, I love every single aspect of everything that I do.
Right.
That's an unrealistic expectation. Now, as business owners and entrepreneurs, we get to say, I don't love this about my business, so I'm going to pay somebody else to do it. And that's a completely different solution. But the reality is, we have to do things in our careers that we would say, hey, I don't actually love this about
Right.
what I have to do. What really allowed me to make the shift, and this mindset of I'm not throwing anything away, I'm taking it with me, was a work in progress for sure, because I really struggled with, if I'm not an attorney, who am I? What value do I bring to the world? And am I really ready to throw that all away? And I really had to wrap around my head around the fact that I wasn't throwing anything away. It took some time. But the thing that kind of kicked me out of the stagnant place I was in, back in 2016, when I was miserable and I started thinking like everything that a law degree was supposed to bring me, it didn't bring me. I was going to hit the reset button on my life, and I was going to go back to bartending, and I was going to figure out where I had made bad choices. I was going to quit practicing law, and I was going to figure out what I actually wanted to do. Well, I know now how awful of an idea that would have been because of the way that my mind was programmed. I would have continued to recreate the same experiences for myself over and over and over again, like Groundhog Day, because my brain hadn't actually been affected in any way and was still making the same choices based upon the same definition of success. A friend of mine said, "Hey, you should open your own law firm." I don't know why I thought that was a good idea, but I did. And we're going on 5 years of my law firm being opened. When I went to a conference and I'm listening to this person speak, this would have been about 2017. And she says, I really wish that people would quit focusing on the career they want to have and focus on the life they want to have and see what gets them there. And that statement was the first time that anybody had ever encouraged me to look at the life I was building for myself, to look at the attorneys that were mentoring me and the life that they had, and whether that was a life I wanted to build. The broken relationships, the failed marriages, the failed relationships with family, the missed vacations, and the stress of still practicing law in your 70s and 80s. And I was like, this is not the life I want to build for myself. So regardless of how much I love practicing law, if it's not going to bring me the life that I want to create for myself, then it is a waste of my energy to continue to build that path as my main source of a use of my time.
And I sit here and I want to applaud you because it had to have been difficult because of the way so many of us are programmed and getting the negative responses that you were getting from family and friends. That has to make you feel like you are on a deserted island. And, am I sinking because I'm not listening to all of them? Or am I going to float because I'm going to make things better? Um, so now you're doing a combination. You're doing two things that you love, obviously. One, you still love the law that you're doing, but you're putting it into a minimal time of your life so that it doesn't take over your life. You're picking and choosing, it sounds like. The clients.
I'm getting to that point. Within the next 5 years, I thought about selling the law firm, and then I decided that that wasn't exactly the path that I wanted to take. So I hired an associate. And within the next 5 years, my goal is to be completely location independent, to have the law firm that is running without my constant need to be there, to be able to do what I need to do for the law firm from a virtual capacity as much as possible. The coaching business is already, by definition, normally virtual. However, I do have my NLP trainings that are in person. Speaking and traveling the world to get on stages, that's really what I see for my next 5 to 10 year stage in life. But as business owners and entrepreneurs, we don't just throw away completely functioning sources of income. So instead of saying, hey, I'm just going to hit the reset button on this and walk away, it's a matter of putting in the effort to build it to where it'll run without me. And then I can make the decision of whether I want to sell that later on down the road. But as far as where my time is going, I would definitely like to have less time in the law firm than in the coaching business within the next 24 months.
And your coaching business sounds similar, but yet very different from many coaches. And on Avoid the Maze, I would say 90% of my guests are coaches. And many of them have been in a path very similar to you. And, woke up one day and finally said, hey, I've got to find me, and either started meeting with other coaches or they just sort of put it together for themselves. But what I love about your title of success architect, you're helping us rebuild ourselves. You're guiding us. Most of us don't think that's what's happening, but it has happened for me. I've rebuilt myself from the bottom up, and I still have further to go because I still want to make changes. And we talked about this yesterday in another podcast that we have to stop looking at each other based on our birth age,
Mm-hmm.
because there are many out there who, like myself, at 60 said, wait a second, I'm still alive. I'm still thriving. I'm just not happy. How can I make it happen?
Yeah.
And a lot of people want to say, you're too old,
Mm-hmm.
just live it out. Other people would look at you and say, well, Amber, you've only put 10 years into the
Right.
business. Okay. And they would look at you and expect, based on age, hey, another 10, 15 years before you change your path. But that's not true today.
No. And it's one of the most honestly depressing statements I hear. And this is so for me, it was never, I'm going to become a coach. That wasn't the way this happened. It happened where I found NLP. Are you familiar with NLP?
No, I'm not.
Okay, so NLP is neuro linguistics programming. It's the study behind the words that we say, the language that we use, the way that our mind has been programmed, how we see the world, how we can reprogram that through our experiences to be able to achieve the success that we really want to have in life.
Okay.
So, kind of the classic example of this is, the kid that as a child is told, hey, like, be careful, you don't want to get hurt. Be careful, you don't want to get hurt. And then they grow up to be an adult that is so risk averse that all they can imagine seeing their life is a 9 to 5. Right. But maybe their soul has something that wants more than a 9 to 5 can give them. When we go back and we can reprogram the relationship that they have with those experiences as a child and realize that be careful, you don't want to get hurt applied in that scenario and does not necessarily apply in a business one, we can get them to the point where they are willing to take more calculated risks to be able to build the life that they want. So we're reprogramming the way that the mind sees the world and what is a realistic outcome of actions and possibilities. I found this science because I went to a sales training that was NLP based, and NLP is very communication based. How does somebody communicate? How do you talk to them on an unconscious level instead of on a conscious level? So sales are very NLP based.
Right.
So I go to this NLP training because I just opened my law firm. I don't know how to run a business. I know nothing. And so I thought, I'm going to go learn something about how to run a business, how to sell, how to communicate with people. And I did. I learned all of those things. But I also noticed that I was showing up in relationships differently, that I was setting boundaries and enforcing them with the people around me, that I was taking responsibility for the things that I should be taking responsibility for in my life and allowing others to take responsibility for what they should be taking responsibility for rather than putting everything on my shoulders. I noticed that I was repairing relationships with family members that I hadn't talked to for years, that I became a better friend, a better family member, a better business owner. And as my sales continue to grow and my relationships continue to get deeper and deeper, I started to realize that what had happened to me was something that other people needed to have the ability to experience. And what finally pushed me over the edge was a conversation I was having with an attorney that I had known for years. And there was actually two of them. The first conversation, I'm explaining all of this to him and the fact that I'm considering starting this coaching business. And he says to me, Amber, there's two types of attorneys in the world. He says, there's the type that they're lifers and they love what they do, and they're going to be doing it until people tell them that they physically can't do it anymore. They love practicing law. And then there's the attorneys that are just dragging themselves through their day, hoping it pays off at some point in time. And I don't know what it feels like to feel like that. And I said, to feel like what? And he says, I don't know what it feels like to love practicing law. And I said, you've been doing it for 20 years. How have you been doing something for 20 years that you don't know what it feels like to love it? And he's like, it's money. So I have that conversation. And then 2 days later, I'm at lunch with another attorney friend of mine. And he says to me, I'm so miserable. I miss my family. I miss my friends. All I need to do is put 9 more years in and I can retire. 9 more years. Now, I don't pull the morbid card very often. My dad was 42 when he died. I was 18 when he passed away. My uncle was 37. My cousin was 18. I was 8. You really want to spend 9 years that you don't know whether you have on a career that you don't want to be in? And as I continued to hear people that had professional postgraduate degrees talk about the sentence that they had to serve in order to retire, I thought there has got to be a better way to do this. And knowing what I know and experiencing what I have experienced, I felt like this was where my new superpower was. Because as you know, excuse me, what's the first thing that we hear from people when we start to tell them that something's not going to work out the way that they want it to, or that something doesn't make sense? 9 times out of 10, the first thing that somebody says to us was, well, you don't know. You've never been there. But I have. And so I can look at them and say, I know exactly what you're going through. And I know exactly why you should not waste the next 9 years of your life waiting to start doing something that you might enjoy.
And that message should be for everyone, no matter what age you are. And that's how my husband and I live our life. And we are not, we're not on the wealthy tier. We know we make it week by week. Um, I won't say we're unhappy. Uh, you know, sometimes we strive a little harder for things, and there's nothing wrong with that as long as it fulfills you inside. And I've been watching my younger son go through this same thing. And as he's been um, applying for a new job, um, we root him on with each endeavor, but we don't tell him which is the one because we don't know. We are not in his shoes. Um, and I'm hoping that parents and spouses and significant others will hear this. You can't tell somebody what makes them happy. And the sooner we understand that, and the sooner we give each other that opportunity to find our new success, whatever that is, we are going to have a much happier community. And I think that's what you were saying, Amber, that you were able to repair relationships, making your community better and stronger because you were finding you. And
Yeah.
it's I used
But
to
I mean, it's more than that too. And I'm sorry to interrupt you, but
no,
I
tell
think
me.
the bigger message, so yes, that message that family members need to understand that they can't tell somebody how to live their life is so important. But I think the bigger message that needs to be spent is that people need to stop reaching out to their family for approval, right? Which is the hardest thing to do. The reason I didn't give up on what I wanted to do and the changes that I wanted to make despite an extremely supportive family that was trying to protect me by telling me that they thought my ideas were ludicrous, is because I had surrounded myself with a community of business owners and entrepreneurs that would support me in a way that my family couldn't. You know, when I'm talking to people about coaching and they say, yeah, I know it's important to have somebody that I can talk to, but I've got my best friend or I've got my mom and we're really close. And my answer is always, you need somebody who's invested in your success that's not invested in your story. You need somebody who is invested in you getting what you want, and they don't have a dog in the fight. They don't have a version of you. Because the reality is, what's so terrifying for most people is that when we start to change something about ourselves, we, by definition, change the stories of everyone around us. And so as we start to grow, the people that are around us are faced with these decisions of, do I want to face where I'm playing small in my life? Am I ready to step out of the shadows that I've been living in, to acknowledge that, you know, I haven't been playing full out? And 99% of the time, the answer to that is no. So what do? They try to claw and pull us back down into the version of us that exists in their reality. This is the reason that family members may love you too much to support you in your professional journey. It's so important to be able to say, I love you and I respect you for having this opinion, and thank you for trying to protect me. And also, this isn't your decision.
I have to say bravo for sharing that message, because that is so important for all of us to understand. So important. This morning, my younger son and I were having a conversation about an upcoming, we hope, final interview.
Okay.
And the cost of living in the city. And I just said to him, you know, if it's what you want and you can make it happen, bravo, go for it. It's not for me to tell you, but I will support your decision one way or the other. And we've been down this road a couple of times. And today he said to me, Mom, you don't even have to tell me that anymore. I know. He said, but I appreciate it. Because I remember being his age. I was going through a divorce at his age, and everybody was telling me how to go about it. You know, this is who you have to hire. This is where you have to live. This is, you know, and I did everything against what everybody said, which probably wasn't the smartest thing back then, but I had to learn, and I had to learn on my own. And
well, and it's
important.
the best laid intentions, right?
Absolutely.
Like, it's the absolute best laid intentions, because this is also why I spent 9 years getting a 4-year degree, is because people who had never been to college told me that if I didn't go back as soon as possible after my dad passed away, that I would never go back again. And were they right? I don't know. But in my head, I was like, well, I'm not going to be the person that doesn't go to college, so I'm just going to fail classes for 4 years, right? I wish that I would have known the things that I knew at 20. But the reality is I probably wouldn't have listened to them. Like, we have to reach that point where what we thought was going to work out doesn't work out before we're willing to start looking at outside things. And I never understood this more than when I tried to have a conversation with somebody who's never made 6 figures about why 6 figures would not fix your problems. And they looked at me like I had 17 heads. Because in what world does money not solve your problem? Well, it's when your problems aren't money related, but you're trying to use money to fix them. And we refuse to acknowledge that that's what we're doing until we get to a certain point and we're like, man, life isn't any better.
Yeah.
But so it's all about planting seeds for those around us who aren't ready to grab onto them yet, but there's going to be a moment that switches. And this is why I love the podcasting world so much. And I love what you're doing, because there very well be maybe somebody listening to this episode or any of the episodes you've done in the past where they say, I mean, I don't know if I can really relate to what this is saying. And then 6 months down the road, something's going to happen that shifts their perspective. And they're like, I don't remember where I heard it. I don't remember,
Exactly.
but I know that somebody said this before. And it didn't click then, but it clicks now. And to me, that's the most powerful thing about human connection.
And that's the reason why we do the podcasts that we do at New Cleveland Radio. I had somebody yesterday call me up and ask me about a new podcast we were starting. And it was, so are you making money? And how successful are you? And how many listeners? And I said, if I can get one listener who gets one thing from a podcast, I'm a success. That's all it takes, is sharing the information. And like you said, it may happen today. It might happen 6 years from now when somebody is streaming something that we've talked about. I'm just so thrilled that you and I were able to have this conversation today.
Me too.
And, it makes me understand my older son even a little more. And when he told us this past year, I'm thinking, about cutting back. And I think the pandemic really his was the hardest time for him, because he was very sensitive to it. He practically didn't leave his condo, but in his state, everything was done through Zoom, and so he was basically working 24/7, only because he had nothing else to do. And now the burnout is there. And when he told me, I just said, you got to do what makes you feel good. And I agree. We don't
Yeah.
know if we're going to wake up tomorrow morning. So I don't want to wait another day to put things off that I have control in today. So, Amber, how can our listeners find you and follow you? Because I know you too have a podcast.
I do. I have a podcast called More Than Corporate, where we talk about defining your own idea of success. And we have conversations just like this with people from all walks of life, obstacle course racers up to business owners and entrepreneurs. We had a fantastic episode with Les Brown, which is one of my favorite interviews ever. He's an amazing human being. So if you want to check out more content like that, or even reach out and jump on a call with me, you can go to successdevelopmentsolutions.com. That's my main hub. From there, you'll be able to get information about my free Facebook group. You'll be able to get information about the podcast, as well as a link to my calendar if you feel like you want to have a conversation about how to really get your definition of success down.
Well, I want to thank you very, very much. We're going to have to do another show in the future and, see where both of us are and where some of our listeners are. Because it just takes, like you said, one little snippet that somebody says, hey, I remember that. Hey, I want to try that today.
Absolutely. And every parent in the world knows how frustrating it is when your kid comes running home, right? I do this to my mom all the time, and I can see she wants to strangle me. Your kid comes running home and says, oh my gosh, you're not going to believe what I heard today. And it is the thing that they have been telling you for the last 17 years of your life. And they're talking about it like it's this new, novel, amazing idea that somebody else came up with. And it takes everything you have to say, oh, I'm so glad that you figured that out, instead of, listen, I've been telling you this for 17 years, right? And sometimes I feel like that's what podcasting is, over and over and over again. But there's that moment that it's going to click and somebody's life is going to get changed because of it. And if that's you in this episode, I really want to hear about that. So please reach out.
I love it. Have a great day and enjoy the warmth in sunny Las Vegas. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye now.